My wife secretly married her boss, then forged my signature on a $200, $0 property sale to fund her escape. Now she's claiming I'm the one stealing from her in our legal battle over everything we built. I never thought I'd be the guy to get like this, but here I am. It all started with little things, missed calls, late nights, weird texts, nothing too obvious at first. My wife always had a way of acting like everything was fine, even when it clearly was. She'd brush off my questions, tell me I was paranoid, or say she was just stressed at work. I trusted her, or at least I thought I did, until I stumbled across something that knocked the wind out of me completely. It was a Thursday evening when I decided to check our bank account online after a long day at the office. Nothing unusual, just the usual bills, some groceries, a few subscriptions. But then I saw a transfer I didn't recognize. It was for $50, $0. My heart stopped. I immediately pulled up the transaction details, and that's when I saw the name, Michael. It was listed as a payment for some property sale. My mind spun. Had been acting strangely lately, more distant, more irritable, always on her phone. But I never suspected she was secretly involved with her boss, Michael, a guy I knew was married himself. I started digging deeper. I checked her phone, which she always kept close. I found texts that made my stomach churn, flirty messages, late-night calls, plans to meet up. The worst part, she told me she was working late that night, but her messages with Michael revealed otherwise. They'd been seeing each other for months, probably longer. The thing that cut me the deepest, in one of the texts she referred to him as her savior, her escape plan, and casually mentioned how she was tired of pretending with me. I couldn't believe I'd been living a lie. All those quiet dinners, family vacations, the way she used to act like she loved me. Turns out, it was all she had been cheating on me with her boss, and now she was planning to leave. The betrayal hit me like a brick wall. I felt sick, angry, hurt, and confused all at once. How had I missed the signs? How long had she been lying? I kept asking myself if I ever really knew her at all. The thing that made my stomach turn even more was the realization that she'd been secretly selling our property, our house, our savings, so she could run off with Michael. I found out later that she forged my signature on a $200, $0 property sale, all behind my back. That's when I knew this wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown scheme to take everything from me. She was draining our accounts, pushing me out of my own life, and I was just supposed to accept it. I felt so powerless, yet I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with destroying what we built together. I remember sitting there that night, staring at the computer screen, trying to process everything. My mind kept racing through every moment, every sign I missed, every time she lied about where she was. I felt betrayed on every level by her, by myself for not seeing it sooner. I was furious, but also devastated. How could she do this? How could someone I loved so much turn out to be capable of such deception? I knew I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. After I found out about the affair and the sale of our house, everything changed in an instant. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and I kept replaying every moment in my head, trying to understand how I had been so blind. The worst part was the sense of betrayal, knowing that had been lying to my face for months. I started questioning every memory, every conversation. It was like a part of my life had been a carefully constructed illusion that she shattered in a single night. The next day, I decided I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I called her at work and told her to come home immediately. When she arrived, her face was a mask of innocence, like she hadn't a clue what I was about to say. I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes, and that made me angrier. I didn't yell at first. I just laid everything out in cold, measured words. I showed her the bank statements, the messages, the proof of the property sale. I told her I knew she had been cheating on me with Michael, that I knew she forged my signature to sell our house, and that I was done. Her reaction was a mix of shock and anger. She tried to deny everything at first, claiming I was making false accusations, that I was jealous and paranoid. She said I was imagining things, that she loved me and only me, and that Michael was just a business colleague she'd been helping out because he was in trouble financially. That was her go-to lie. "He's just a friend," she said. "You're overreacting." But I knew better. I had seen the proof. I told her she was a liar, that I wasn't going to let her destroy what we had, and that I wanted her out of the house. She snapped back with a barrage of accusations of her own. She called me controlling, jealous, and said I'd never cared about her, only about money and status. She told me I was a terrible husband, that I never paid attention to her needs, that I was too busy with work to see what she was going through. Then she threw in the classic line, "You're just mad because I found someone better. Michael's the real thing, and you're just a loser trying to hold onto what you never appreciated." That hit me hard. I'd always thought we had something real, but now I saw her for what she really was: manipulative, selfish, and ready to throw everything away for some guy who clearly didn't give a damn about her either. The confrontation didn't end there. She started crying, acting like the victim, trying to guilt me into forgiving her or at least letting her stay until she figured things out. But I wasn't buying it. I told her she was leaving, that I wanted her out of the house by the weekend, and I was going to file for divorce. I told her I'd see her in court over the property, the money, everything. I felt a strange mix of relief and despair. Relief that I finally had proof and was taking control, but despair because I knew my life was never going to be the same. That night, I sat alone in what was once our living room, staring at the empty space where our pictures used to hang. I felt so hollow, so betrayed. My mind kept darting between anger and sadness. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind to her lies. I was furious at her for cheating, for stealing from me, for destroying our life together. But I was also hurt, deeply hurt, by the fact that I'd loved her, trusted her, and she'd thrown it all away for some guy who only saw her as a way to get what he wanted. The next day, I started making plans. I contacted a lawyer, gathered all the evidence, and prepared myself for what was coming. I knew she'd fight me on everything. She always was good at lying her way out of trouble. But I wasn't going to let her walk away with our house, our savings, or anything else. I had to protect what was mine. I had to get to the bottom of her lies, expose her for what she was, and make sure she didn't get away with it. Honestly, I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. All I wanted was to fix things, to somehow undo the damage, but I knew deep down that the only way forward was to fight, and I was ready for that fight. Over the next few days, everything moved at a breakneck pace. I spent every waking moment working with my lawyer, gathering evidence, and trying to piece together exactly how deep's deception went. It was like peeling an onion. Each layer revealed another lie, another betrayal. I found emails and texts from Michael that confirmed their affair was ongoing for months. I also uncovered bank transfers, not just the $50, $0 from that property deal, but multiple smaller payments that looked like hush money or some kind of payoff. What really made my blood boil was the forged signature on the property sale. I got a copy of the official documents from the county records, and I could see my name was forged in her handwriting. She had faked my signature on that $200, $0 sale, probably using some old signature she'd stolen, or the house was gone, sold to a stranger, and she was planning her escape with Michael. It wasn't just an affair, it was outright theft. I confronted her again, this time with the evidence. She was furious, calling me crazy, paranoid, and insisting I was making everything up. She said she only did it because I was a terrible husband, that I never paid attention to her, and that she deserved happiness. She claimed she was leaving because I was emotionally distant, that I never understood her, and that she was done pretending to be the perfect wife. But I wasn't buying her lies anymore. She was a liar, plain and simple. She'd been planning her escape for months, and I was just now catching up. The legal battle started to take shape. My lawyer told me that's plan was to get rid of her financial ties to me, sell everything, and run off with Michael. She had even opened a secret bank account in her name alone, trying to hide assets and money. I knew I had to act fast. I filed for an emergency injunction to freeze the sale of our remaining assets, and I started the divorce proceedings. I was determined to get back what I could and hold her accountable for everything she'd stolen. Throughout all this, I couldn't help feeling a mix of anger and sadness. I was angry at her for cheating, for stealing, for lying. But I was also heartbroken, realizing that the woman I'd loved and trusted had been capable of such deception. I kept asking myself where it all went wrong, what I missed, and how I could have been so blind. I was furious at her, but underneath that, I felt a deep sense of loss. I had built a life with her, invested in our future, and now it was all falling apart because she chose to betray me for a guy who didn't care about her the way I did. One night I sat in what used to be our bedroom, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the moments we shared, the good, the bad, the ones I thought meant something. And I realized that I had to let go of the anger, at least for now. I couldn't change what she did, but I could control how I responded. I made a decision to fight, yes, but also to start healing. I knew I couldn't undo the damage, but I could at least protect myself and try to move forward. I also started reflecting on what I learned from all this. Trust is fragile. People can hide their true selves behind a facade for a long time. And sometimes, love isn't enough to save a relationship when betrayal is involved. I learned that I have to be more careful, more aware, and that I can't just assume everything is fine because it looks that way on the surface. The hardest part was realizing that was willing to destroy everything we built. Our home, our savings, our future, just for her own happiness, or maybe her version of it. I was angry she could be so selfish, but I also felt sorry for her. She was chasing something she thought she needed, but she threw away what she already had, a life with me. That's what hurts the most. Knowing I was just a pawn in her game, someone she used and discarded. Now I'm just trying to get through each day, one step at a time. The legal fight is ongoing, and I know she'll do everything she can to fight me on the assets, but I'm not backing down. I want to get justice, even if it's just to prove she was the one stealing from me all along. And honestly, I do know if I'll ever fully recover from this, but I do know I have to keep going. Because if I don't, she wins. And I refuse to let that happen. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of court dates, legal filings, and endless sleepless nights. Every morning I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, but I pushed through because I knew I had to fight for what was rightfully mine. Of course, wasn't just going to sit back and let me take her down without a fight. She lawyered up and her stories kept changing. One day she'd say she was just trying to find herself. The next she'd claim I was emotionally abusive and that she only cheated because she was miserable. Classic gaslighting. She was trying to manipulate the situation, make me doubt myself, but I refused to let her. She also started with the blame shifting, trying to spin the story that I was the one stealing from her. That was rich, coming from someone who forged my signature on a property sale and secretly transferred assets into her own name. I'd catch her in little lies, and her tone would shift from bitchy to desperate. She'd say things like, "You're just mad because I found someone who actually cares about me," or "You never loved me anyway." That one stung, but I knew better than to fall for her crocodile tears. She was just trying to distract me from her crimes. One of the most shocking moments came when I found out she'd been secretly depositing money into a new account, trying to hide her assets. She was planning her escape, and I was just a pawn she was discarding. I had her bank statements showing transfers that she'd completely hidden from me. It made me furious. How could someone I loved do this? How could she be so cold, so calculating? I felt betrayed on every level. It wasn't just the affair or the theft. It was the complete betrayal of trust, the way she'd lied to my face for so long. Things got even messier when she started making accusations against me. She claimed I was the one stealing from her, that I was controlling and manipulative. That was her way of trying to turn the tables, to make me look like the villain. But I had proof, screenshots, bank records, text messages that proved otherwise. Still, her words cut deep. I'd never thought she'd turn against me so completely. It was like watching someone you once loved become a stranger, a villain in her own story. In the courtroom, things got tense. My lawyer presented the evidence of her forgery, the hidden assets, and the affair. His lawyer tried to spin it as a marital dispute, claiming I was just jealous and paranoid, but the judge saw through her lies. The evidence was overwhelming. I was awarded a temporary freeze on the sale of our remaining property, and I filed for full custody of the house and any remaining assets. I knew would fight me tooth and nail, but I was determined to hold my ground. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and despair. Relief because I was finally taking control, fighting back against her lies. But despair because I realized how far gone she was, willing to destroy everything we'd built just to run off with her new lover. I kept asking myself if I could ever trust again, if I'd ever be able to look at a woman the same way. The heartbreak was real. I'd loved her, trusted her, and she turned out to be someone I barely recognized. That realization hit me hard every single day. One night, I sat alone in the dark, just thinking. I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about the good times, the bad times, and all the moments I'd ignored because I wanted to believe in us. I finally understood that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the truth has to come out, no matter how painful it is. I told myself I'd be okay, that I'd survive this, but deep inside I knew I wouldn't forget what she did. Not ever. I also learned a lot about myself. I learned I was stronger than I thought, capable of fighting for what's right. I learned that trust is fragile and must be earned every day. And I learned that sometimes love means walking away, even when it hurts like hell. I realized I'd been so focused on fixing the relationship that I hadn't seen the signs of her deception. From now on, I promised myself I'd be more cautious, more aware, and never let someone manipulate me like that again. As I sit here writing this, I know the battle isn't over. There's still a lot to do, a lot of legal work ahead, and a future that remains uncertain. But I also know one thing for sure. I'm not going to let her get away with stealing my life, my money, or my trust. I'll fight for what's mine, and I'll do everything I can to rebuild what I lost. The betrayal cut deep, but it also made me realize what truly matters. And that's something I'll carry with me no matter what happens next. The months dragged on, and each day felt like a battle to stay afloat. The court hearings were intense, full of accusations, evidence presentations, and legal maneuvering. Continued to lie, deny, and spin stories, but I had enough proof to counter every claim she made. Still, it was exhausting. Every hearing, every new piece of evidence she tried to dismiss or twist into something else. She was good at playing the victim, crying in court, acting like I was the one causing all the chaos. But I knew better. I had seen her true colors, and I had the evidence to back it up. One of the most shocking revelations came during one of the court sessions. I learned that she'd been secretly working with a private investigator to dig up dirt on me, trying to find anything she could use to turn the judge against me. It was classic manipulation. She was trying to paint me as the villain, the one who was controlling and abusive. But the investigator's report showed she'd been spying on me, following my every move, trying to catch me doing something wrong. It was surreal. I felt like I was in some twisted game, with her trying to destroy me from the shadows while I was fighting in the open. Meanwhile, I focused on protecting what was left of our assets. The house was still in limbo, frozen from the sale, and I was fighting to keep it. I also hired a forensic accountant to track her hidden assets and uncover any money she'd squirreled away. It was a war of information, and I was determined not to let her win. Every piece of evidence I gathered was another brick in the wall of her lies. I started to see the pattern. She'd been planning this for months, maybe even longer. All the while I was just working, trying to keep everything afloat, oblivious to her secret schemes. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, angry, and broken some days. I kept asking myself if I could trust anyone anymore. It was hard to believe that the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was capable of forging my signature, secretly selling our house, and lying about everything. I'd never been so hurt in my life. But at the same time, I realized I had no choice but to keep fighting. Giving up wasn't an option anymore. I had to stand my ground for myself and for what we had shared. One thing I found surprising was how much support I received from friends and family. People who knew us both couldn't believe actions. They told me I was strong for pushing through, for not just breaking down and letting her walk all over me. That support kept me going, even when I felt like giving up. I also started to see how much I'd been blind to her true nature. I'd always thought she was ambitious and driven, but now Saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish person who would do anything to get what she wanted. There was a moment when I almost lost hope. During one of the court hearings, this lawyer brought up a false accusation, claiming I'd been abusive, trying to paint me as unstable. It was a low blow, and for a second I questioned everything. But my lawyer was quick to counter, presenting all the evidence that proved I was a stable, honest person. That moment made me realize how much she was willing to lie and manipulate just to win. It also reminded me that I couldn't let her define my story. I had to stay focused, stay strong, and keep fighting for what was right. Throughout all this, I learned a lot about resilience. I learned that even when everything feels like it's falling apart, you can find a way to stand back up. I learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who your real friends are. And I learned that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to walk away to save yourself. I knew I couldn't fix what was broken, but I could at least protect what was left and start rebuilding from scratch. Now I'm still in the middle of this legal battle, but I'm confident that I'll come out of it stronger. I've realized that I don't need someone who manipulates and lies to be happy. I deserve better, and I'm finally starting to believe that I'll find happiness again, without her. The pain will fade, and someday I hope to look back and see this as the chapter where I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that no one can take away your strength unless you let them. And I refuse to let her take that from me. The final stretch of this nightmare has been the toughest. After months of legal battles, I finally got to sit across from her in court one last time. The judge reviewed all the evidence, my proof of her forgery, the hidden assets, the affair, and her attempts to manipulate the system. It was clear she'd lied at every turn, trying to cover her tracks, but there was just too much concrete proof. The judge awarded me full custody of what remained of our property, ordered her to pay back the stolen money, and issued a restraining order to keep her away from me and any of the assets she tried to hide. Honestly, I felt a weird mixture of relief and exhaustion. It was as if a pressure I hadn't even fully realized I'd been under finally started lifting. The weight of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak hadn't left me overnight, but knowing I'd fought tooth and nail to protect what was mine gave me a sense of closure. I finally saw that standing up for myself was the right choice, even if it had come at a heavy cost. In the aftermath, I moved out of the house. It was strange walking through those empty rooms, knowing she'd sold everything, lied, cheated, and tried to wipe me out. I sold the house myself, cut ties with our joint accounts, and started rebuilding from scratch. I had a new place now, a small apartment, nothing fancy but mine. I didn't want to be surrounded by the ghosts of our past anymore. It was time to focus on myself, on healing, and on figuring out what comes next. I won't lie, there are days when the pain hits hard. I still get angry, still wonder how someone I loved could turn into this person. But I also realize that holding on to that anger only hurts me. I've started therapy, trying to process everything, and I've learned to forgive myself for trusting her for so long. More importantly, I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. I survived her betrayal, and I'm still standing. Looking back, I know I'll carry this experience with me forever, but I refuse to let it define me. I've come to understand that sometimes the greatest act of love you can do is to walk away from someone who's only bringing you pain. I've learned that honesty and integrity are worth more than any material possession, and that true happiness comes from within. I want anyone reading this who might be going through something similar to know, don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts. If you feel something's wrong, dig deeper. You might be surprised what you find. And when the truth comes out, don't be afraid to fight for yourself. It's not easy and it's not quick, but in the end, it's worth it. Because no matter how much you hurt, now there's a brighter future waiting for you. One where you're in control, where you're respected, and where you can finally start to heal. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I do know I'll be okay. The betrayal was brutal, but it taught me resilience, strength, and the importance of never settling for less than honesty and loyalty. I've lost a lot, but I've gained clarity. And that's worth more than any house, any money, or any lie she ever told. I'm moving on now, and I'm finally ready to rebuild my life, better, stronger, and wiser than before.